Are you finding it hard to develop your business and tell your brand's unique story? Well, in today's episode, we're joined by Madeline Reeves, agency founder and creative consultant, and she explains how to do just that. Welcome to the Unified Brand Podcast, brought to you by Elements Brand Management, a weekly brand building and brand strategy podcast to help you unlock your brand's potential, stand out from the competition, and create impact. So today we're joined by Madeline Reeves, founder and CEO of Fearless Foundry, a creative consultancy focused on advancing ambitious humans from around the globe. Great to have you on the Unified Brand Podcast, Madeline. It'd be good to learn a little bit more about yourself, what you do, and Fearless Foundry.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a joy to be on, Chris. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I do a lot of different things given any given day, but my core focus is really using the world of marketing and branding to elevate underrepresented entrepreneurs. So my background, I spent the majority of my career originally in the technology space, and I kind of ended up in technology a bit by chance. I had my first kid fairly young and was looking for a career that paid well because I was a single mom. And when I got into the technology industry, the thing I loved about it was the room for growth. And I found my way through a bunch of different companies, hopping on really brand new teams that were bringing a new product to market, and had a little bit of that startup energy where you could just try anything and test something out and, put a bold message out there and see what happened and use that information to inform the way that the product grew over time. And I loved that. I loved that startup moment. But what I didn't love was going to conferences, going to industry events, and just realizing how limited the type of people who were getting support in that industry were, the type of people who were getting funding. And I really wanted to work more closely with female founders. And there weren't a lot in the tech space. I could count them all on one hand. And so about 8 years into that career, I had started to just work on the side with friends who were starting their own brands and their own businesses. And they kept on approaching me with small creative projects. They were building their first Squarespace site, or they were starting to, take off on social media, or needed business cards. And my background, much prior to working in tech, is I had been really a creative individual. And so I loved taking on these small projects. And over time, I just started thinking about more and more, what would it be like if I took all these sales and marketing and business development skills that I've built in tech and bring that expertise to founders of small businesses. And so I took a leap of faith about 3 years ago and started doing that, full time, terrifying to say the least, but it worked. And today I have a team of, 10 amazing female creatives that work with me. And we do, a lot of different things at the Fearless Foundry, but we say that we really focus on starting with strategy. There's a lot of agencies out there that are very tactic heavy and just, churning out content. And what we really try and sit down with our clients and do is get to the heart of their brand and their messaging. And, we might help them craft their brand a little bit firmer or even build in the ground up. And then from there, we become this outsourced creative team that gets to be a collaborative force around getting brands to the market. And then the great thing for the founders, it allows for them to bring all their creative ideas to life, but they don't have to be the person to execute on it. And they don't have to spend, tons and tons of money hiring a big marketing team in-house either during those early stages. So yeah, that's me. And that's what we do.
Yeah, that's really cool. So just out of that, why Fearless? Why Fearless Foundry? Where does the name origin come from?
So Fearless, was a really, really important mantra for me when I was starting out on my own, because there were so many people around me who thought I was crazy for leaving, a really well-paying tech job. It was, the industry that everybody wanted to get into. And people kept going, aren't you scared? And so part of me feels like I wove it into my business identity so that I could, remind myself that that was a quality I had to cultivate every day. And, to be clear to us, being fearless doesn't mean being void of fear. It means, looking it in the face and showing up and doing it anyways. And then the Foundry portion kind of came to me in a really interesting instance. We were, trying to get our team rallied around, really who we were as a brand and what exactly was it that we do that makes us so different. And this phrase just kind of came to me out of thin air. It was, we forge founders on the path to entrepreneurial equity. And to me, that's why I really wanted to work in this space, was, again, to level this playing field. And so helping entrepreneurs like walk through the fire that really is starting a company, and to be, a right hand to them during that season is really important. So, we were playing with this idea of, forging and walking through the foundry. And then it kind of hit us. We were like, oh, we're a foundry, we're really helping shape people and support people on this journey.
I love talking to fellow sort of brand builders and creatives, because I love language. And I think that you tend to find that language plays a big part. So you use some things there like walking through the fire, with Foundry. And when you said Fearless Foundry and you started talking about founders, I was thinking, yeah, there's definite connection there. It's a really great name. And then the fearless aspect, like you said, going out into the world with that fearless approach, I think is really important. So what is it that you love most about helping entrepreneurs to be fearless and start their businesses?
I think, my favorite moment is watching somebody who couldn't quite get their story out there in the way that they wanted, really transform and shift and connect with people in the way that they had originally envisioned when they started their company. So my favorite moment is, when you're talking to a founder and, whenever I start off, even just any prospect conversations, I just ask them to tell me the story behind their brand, because, it is such a bold move to build a business. And so there's usually some pretty good stories underneath the hood. But what I find quite common is, in all the other rigmarole that happens to get that business off the ground, sometimes that story really gets lost in the process. Maybe they hired a copywriter to build the website and it wasn't interpreted properly, or maybe, they've got some social media that's being put out, but somehow it's not being translated correctly and connecting with the customer. And so what I love to do is I'm a language nerd like you. I love to excavate that story and then figure out how can we be telling it better. And the thing that's so amazing these days about marketing is, we have all these different platforms and places that we can be sharing, but there's always going to be, a platform that's better than another to be able to get that story into the hands of the right people. And, founders these days just look at social media, for example, and go, oh my gosh, I've got to be on LinkedIn. I've got to be on Twitter. I've got to be on Instagram. And so they kind of dilute the message, or are just casting the same thing out in different places, but not really distilling and understanding where it meets that customer where they are. And so I love being a part of the process that allows them to reconnect and rediscover that why behind starting the business, and then helping them channel that story in the appropriate direction so that it meets the ideal customer exactly where they are.
Cool. Yeah. I like the idea of sort of focusing down and doubling down on that message and distilling it to the right places. I think that's really important, especially today with so much content and so many different platforms you can get involved with. And yeah, I think you're right. You need to rein it back a bit and focus on where your customers are. Definitely. So in terms of, I'd say, sort of biggest misconceptions you see around brand development in the industry, what are some of the things that you see that are those misconceptions that a lot of your clients come in?
I think, a lot of people still believe brand is like a logo and a tagline.
Yep, definitely.
We see a lot of this, right? We see a lot of this, and that might work in certain industries for a period of time. Like we do a lot of rebranding work, and, you can maybe get by with that for the first 3, maybe even 5 years, but you're going to get to a point where you are not pushed beyond, your close concentric circle of contacts and your network. And if you want to go beyond that and differentiate yourself, particularly if in your market, there's a lot of competitors or there's a lot of other people in the space, you're going to have to step out of that and really establish a brand identity that has a lot more to do with your values and, the reasons behind the business and the causes you care about. And, the thing that we have seen so much in the past year is kind of 2 things. One is, no surprises here, that customers want to purchase from companies that share their ethos. And so even the product companies we work with, they have such a bigger mission and vision behind the brand than just sell as many of this sports bra as possible sort of thing. And so helping companies distill that brand is super important, and making sure that they step beyond just, those old world kind of slogan, tagline, crap to fill a website header sort of thing. But the other piece that we've seen a lot of that really excites me in the space is not just, market driven, it's actually being driven by founders themselves. And I think that COVID had a big thing to do with this, which was that we really believe, and we work with a lot of other partners who believe that, the best brands are actually serving as repellents, so as much as they're drawing in the right people, they're actually pushing away the people who are, time wasters or tire kickers, people who don't actually really know or want to be a part of what you do, and just kind of keeps them out of your sphere to begin with. But a lot of people, when they start a company, they build a brand that's quite generic, that's quite safe because, scarcity shows up and we're like, well, yes, I want to say yes to everyone so that I have money in my bank account. And so what we saw during this past kind of year or so, which I loved and really excited me, was business owners stepping forward and going, if I'm going to work during a global pandemic, if I'm going to be pulling this off at home with, 2 kids running around, whatever the scenario was, I'm only going to be working with clients that I really love. And so to do that, there was this recognition that I need to reinvent the way that I'm talking about myself and my business so that I'm only attracting those customers I really want to work with. And so that process is really exciting to me. And it gets me really thrilled for the future of this space because it means that more people are taking brands seriously. More people are recognizing the ways that it can impact the type of relationships you build and the types of people you're working with on a day-to-day basis. And that brand is something so much bigger than just, a little image and a line of copy.
Definitely. Yeah, you hear that quite a lot. Still, people have that idea that it's just the logo, whereas obviously, like you said, it's so much more than that. And I think you're completely right in terms of you need to have that delineation between what you believe and also what you stand against as well. And I think, how do you find it with clients? A lot of the times they're sort of resistant to stepping outside their comfort zone. And I guess, obviously, they need to be fearless, they need to step outside that comfort zone. And there's that saying that all growth happens outside your comfort zone. And I think, how do you find it? How do you help your clients move from safety of a brand that is safe to challenging the status quo, being a bit more edgy, being a bit more putting those lines in the sand?
The big thing that I want our clients to lean into and we work with them to lean into is core values. So for me, the big pillar behind any great brand is a sense of core values that you can come back to and use to make decisions and define the way that you're speaking to your customers. And ultimately, those are values that you would want to have in common between yourself and the types of humans you're attracting to your business. And, a lot of people have never thought about core values in the context of a company because we think of companies as these like neutral entities. But that's not the case at all. And so the biggest thing for me in this space is helping people recognize that these things actually matter. A lot of people think, oh, I don't need to be sharing something like that. No one cares about my opinion on Black Lives Matter, or nobody cares about my opinion on the environment. But we're living in a world where everybody needs to have a stance on these types of issues. And again, one of the ways that I can help push them is point them to a scenario where they showed up in a conversation or started working with a company and they realized that that company had the exact opposite values, that they were exploiting their employees or they were evading their taxes or they were doing something that just morally felt so wrong for them. And reminding them that their time is really precious and who do they spend it with? Who are they endorsing in a way if they're working with businesses that don't share their belief system? And so some of it is this people kind of want permission, but it's gotten a lot easier because you can point to so many larger companies these days who are taking stands. And so reminding them that it doesn't matter, the size of your business, it really determines the way you're able to work and grow in the world if you step up and share your values. And so, for me, it's a process. People usually get scared somewhere along the line. Like you probably recognize this too, especially when you're doing branding work and you're making a big shift in somebody's story or just the way you're communicating with the market. There's a moment, like it's usually the month before launch, where everyone wants to pause and everybody's, wanting to change the copy, or everybody, usually they point to a design flaw or say that it's something else entirely other than just the fear of stepping out and being bold. And what we really try and encourage our clients to understand is that there's something so powerful on the other side of putting a brand like that out into the world, which is that suddenly you are going to be calling in opportunities. You're going to be calling in clients and customers. You're going to be calling in, partners, all of these different pieces that wouldn't have known to work with you otherwise, because you were just another kind of generic person that they would have passed by had they stopped on your side or had they heard about you in some other form or fashion.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important for more businesses to be able to do that and step forward and step up to that, I think, and just lay their cards on the table, really. I think we're getting a more open society. And I think with the emergence as well of LinkedIn, you're seeing a society where businesses are more open, but also that personal brand of the leader or the founder is also really important to that mix. So you have the company brand, but you've also got the individuals. And I think that really drives forward as well, that need to be authentic and transparent and open about where you stand with certain things. So apart from that aspect, what other areas do you see that really holds businesses back from being the brand they could be?
I'm like, how much time do we have? One of the big things that actually holds a lot of businesses back is an aversion to growth. I think that there are a lot of companies that are uncomfortable with scaling and don't want to step out of a space that they've been in for a really long time and try things that are new. And so, case in point in the world of marketing, a lot of companies are sitting on a gold mine of opportunity, but they just don't step out and reach out to folks. In the case of LinkedIn or other social media platforms, when in history have you ever had this opportunity to get in front of that many people for free, ostensibly? I mean, maybe you're paying to work with a company like ours to help, put the post or the word out there. But, the fact that you can get that many eyeballs is fantastic. But I think a lot of people are scared and intimidated by putting themselves out there in that way. And so that's one of the areas where I see, a lot of people stumble is they just don't take and reach for those opportunities that are available to them. The other that really comes to mind, though, is this kind of emphasis on really building a company and a culture that you can stand behind. I think this past year, it's been so interesting to watch because here in the States, as we had so much unemployment due to COVID, but we also haven't had this massive return back to work yet, and everybody I know who's got a company has really struggled to hire and find people. And I think it's a sign of people not wanting to be a part of cultures and business workplaces that don't really support them truly as a whole human. Maybe they were, fired at the start of the pandemic, or they weren't offered the kind of flexibility that they need. And so what I hope to see a lot of companies do in this moment is really reflect back on the ways in which they've built organizations and environments that maybe don't work for people anymore. And to really assess, how can we be shifting culture, or how can we be shifting the way we give leave, or, you guys over in the UK have so much better policies, in my opinion, than the support systems we have over here in the US. And I think we've sat, on our hands a little bit, thinking that government is going to change the way that organizations run. And really, it's up to the leaders of these organizations to step forward and say, I'm going to build a policy that supports, women to take maternity leave, or I'm going to build a policy that, encourages people, to take time off and provides them, adequate vacation time. And so that's another area where I feel like businesses have been stumbling a little bit, and that, leaders really need to look within themselves and say, if I wasn't just here at the top, if I was somebody starting out in this organization, what are the kinds of support systems I would need to really be successful inside of this organization? And then how can I build that culture so that people want to come work for me and join this company?
Definitely. And I think it's also that culture also breeds consistency in the brand. It also helps to, like you said, connect with that wider audience. I think it's Zoom. Obviously, this last year, they've grown massively. I mean, we're recording this podcast on Zoom, but they've seen this early and they've put something in place called the Happiness Crew. So each of their locations, they've got a team called the Happiness Crew, which is just dedicated to brand culture in each of those places, keeping culture on track, making sure that it's all in place. And I think there needs to be more work done on internal culture, I think, and more about spreading those values, because ultimately the employees make the business, make the brand. It's those people in those positions that ultimately develop that brand for you. They're the front line of your brand at all times. If they're unhappy and they're reaching out to customers or they're talking to your customers, from a business point of view, there's that, but also just from a humanist point of view, I think it's really important. So what are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your career?
Oh, a lot. And it's actually interesting because a lot of it had to do with organizational culture. So part of the reason I know I was meant to become an entrepreneur is I often reached a point inside of organizations where I just felt like I couldn't grow any further and felt like I was constantly having to butt heads against somebody to get, great ideas out into the world. Early on, the biggest challenge that I faced in the world of technology was being so young. A lot of people wouldn't take me seriously because I was, in my early 20s, and I was often the only woman in the room as well. And so, I remember one of the first tech companies I had started out at, I had a job where I was really focused on speaking to a certain subset, a certain channel of their customers. And these customers had the same kind of request over and over again about their product. And so being young and hungry and ambitious in my career, I spent, weekends and late nights, like working with the product team, trying to figure out, how could we solve for this need of the customer? And I was so proud of myself. And I put together this big presentation and I brought it to the leadership team. And said, oh, this is what we're asking for. And it's actually not that expensive to produce. And here's what the dev team says and how long it will take. And, end of this presentation, I'm expecting everyone to be like so proud of me for bringing this idea forth. And I basically got like a pat on the head and like, nice idea, young lady, like get back to work. And so that kind of spawned me to sit, and say, okay, is this an organization where I really want to exist? If my ideas aren't going to be taken seriously. And so I moved on to another company after that and had a similar experience and moved on to another company after that. And I just got to this point where I was, sitting with myself and had all of these ideas, particularly around educational content and the ways that we could be using online platforms like Zoom to reach customers globally. And, I was like, I wonder what it would look like if I didn't just give these ideas away to somebody who didn't value them, but instead if I put them into my own brand or business or into customers that really cared about the work that we were creating. And that was such a game changer for me to think about, oh man, instead of just waiting for somebody else's permission, what if I could just go out and do the things that I wanted to do and to see the success come back from that? And that was again, those ideas that kept me up at night until I was like, okay, I have to go out and build my own business and just see what it's like as compared to these other experiences I've had and decide if that's the path for me. And, it's terrifying. It's terrifying to start something of your own, especially if you have a family and you have people relying on you. But for me, it's always been more satisfying to feel like I was in control of my story than dependent and waiting on somebody else to decide what happened next.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And I think that those people in those organizations should be kicking themselves, to be honest, in terms of what they missed out on, in terms of your inspiration, your ideas and your creativity and what you could bring to that team. I think it's a shame they didn't recognize that because it's apparent in abundance. The fact that you started your own company and you've taken that forward and you're helping other people. It's just, it's their loss. Let's put it that way. But yeah, it's something that needs to be addressed. There's a client I'm working with at the moment that's in an industry where it's pretty archaic, and she is looking to create a company that again has a focus on sort of female entrepreneurs in that space and wants to develop them because it is needed. And it baffles me how it's still in certain industries it's backward. Let's put it that way. I think it's important to continually talk about it and continually shine a light on it. I think is really important because everybody should be able to give and have the opportunities they should have. And everyone should be able to give their best and be like, in your case with that scenario, that was amazing. You put that extra time and that extra work in and it just, it's frustrating.
I mean, and it's so common is the other thing too. And like, this is the part that really gets me excited about, growing our company is that, we're really focused on hiring young marketing talent, and we usually scoop them up after they've had like one or two negative agency experiences. And, I like to get talent early in their career because they are so full of brilliant and bright ideas. And especially young folks today. I mean, we have a new hire and it's like, she knows everything there is to know about TikTok. I bless her. Like, I feel like a million years old when I log onto a platform like that. But, that having somebody join my team who has a creativity and a passion for it and understands it, like that's huge to me. And I think that young people are one of the most underutilized resources because we're like, oh, they don't have experience. But that's how we all got experience, was diving out into the world and testing things out. And in marketing, it's so important to have creative, fresh ideas and people who are willing to try new things on, and find that young people are really apt. And especially now with all of them growing up, I'm not a million years old. I grew up with a lot of technology, but I also grew up in a world without technology. I had kind of the 50-50 split, whereas today's, Gen Z like grew up, with all of this technology at their fingertips. And so they're way more adept at me even than to pick up a new platform or to test something out or to tell me like, oh, what if we did it a different way? And I love that because it pushes me to be a better creative, to have people around me with new, fresh ideas constantly coming to the table.
Yeah, 100%. It's exciting when you have people around you with new, fresh ideas. And I think you're right in terms of, like TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I'm not entirely sure I fully understand it, but I'm on there. I grew up with MSN Messenger, so kind of I'm pretty old. So in terms of that side of things, definitely. And it's not a hindrance as well. A lot of people, especially young people coming into roles, they're not going to have a lot of those barriers and hindrances that have been picked up over time. They've got a fresh approach. They'll try things differently. I think it's really important to celebrate. And I don't understand why anyone wouldn't want that kind of enthusiasm, creativity. It just baffles me, really does. So in terms of entrepreneurship, what do you think are sort of some of the most important factors?
The big one I've been working with lately is like mental toughness. The thing about being an entrepreneur is there is a little bit of a feeling at times like you're just kind of in the free fall, like you've jumped off a cliff and you are falling through the clouds and you can't really quite see where you land. And it takes, a few years to feel confident in your ability to navigate tough circumstances. And especially when you're the leader of a company, there's going to be unexpected things every single week that you have no idea how to handle. It's the first time you've encountered that situation. And so, the other piece beyond mental toughness for me has been really supporting myself with coaches and communities of entrepreneurs so that I have other folks that I can go to. And sometimes it's to be like, oh my gosh, this happened. How would you navigate this? Have you handled a situation like this before? And to get feedback. And other times it's just to say like, this is such shit. And to have somebody else be like, yes, this is such shit. Like, I'm sorry you're going through that.
I think that's a really, really important skill to have. And I don't know if you find that, but I sometimes slip into those habits of staying up too late, eating the wrong things, just working constantly. And it does take its toll, and it takes its toll in your performance.
Mm-hmm. I was so victim to that the first year. And I see this now because I work with so many early stage entrepreneurs. I think there's this mentality of like, well, if I just keep going, I can't fail, right? And so you're kind of in this mode of constantly being on, and working too late and saying yes to every single project that comes your way, whether or not you actually really like the person or the thing. And there was this moment kind of a year and a half in where my husband and my kids and they were just like, who are you? Like, we missed you. You're never happy. You said you were leaving, corporate so that you could do something that made you happier. And it really took a resetting of boundaries and having to look at myself and say, okay, what are the things that will allow me to have a healthy distance between myself and the business, and also to have ample free time? And, some people, it's little things like, changing the way you schedule or changing up your eating habits or things like that. For me, it was a little bit more that I had to create physical distance between myself and my business. I had, I was working from home for the first year, and anytime I would walk by the room where that laptop was, my anxiety in terms of how many unanswered emails or what have you would distract me and not allow me to be joyful and be in the present. And so my second year, I got an office, and, I'm lucky to live in a town where that's, quite affordable thing to do. And it really changed the game for me, because to be able to say, okay, it's 5:30. I'm going to leave the laptop here. I'm going to close things up, and I'm going to go home, and I'm going to have this other space and this other life. It really allowed for our family to reconnect and have a different level of quality time. And, I didn't want to live at my office. I like it here, but I didn't want to live here. And so it forced me to realize the ways in which I had let my work kind of invade my home life and set a new way of relating to the business that was healthier for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. I found the pandemic did that to me to a point. The pandemic kind of pushed me to work more, to have that kind of attitude and just continually go. And it just a couple of times where you sort of almost get to a point of burnout, you just feel really stressed. It's not good for you. It's not good for, like you said, the family as well. So yeah, definitely worth investing in some meditation and some time to yourself and that kind of thing, 100%. So in terms of that, what other things do you do to unwind? What are things like hobbies and interests and things that you do when you're not at the office?
A couple of things that I'm pretty passionate about are yoga is a big one for me. So I'm a certified yoga instructor, and pre-pandemic, I used to teach a couple days a week because I would joke that I would have to be in good shape to teach. And so it kind of forced me to be regular and routine about my practice. But I've gotten back to that a lot more lately. And I'm, really, really grounded and glad to just have a practice like that to return to. And obviously with yoga, comes breath work and meditation and other wellness practices. I'm also a really big fan of cooking. Cooking is just a way to, shut off the side of my brain that's hyper analytical and kind of always in strategy or logistics mode, and just to be tactile. And so, I find a lot of joy, and I'm the kind of cook who, I don't really follow recipes. To me, it's a little bit more of an intuitive and creative process. And so, I love opening up the fridge and just figuring out what would be good to nourish our family. And that's, a big way for me to give love to my family is to cook for them. And then another one that I've been returning to in recent weeks is I actually, I originally growing up thought I would go to school for fashion design. It was Project Runway had its heyday when I was younger. And I had spent a lot of time in high school doing drawing and design classes and graphic design classes, and gotten really passionate about making clothes, largely because, I grew up in a really wealthy area, but my mom was like, yeah, no way, we're not going to pay, hundreds of dollars for a pair of pants kind of stuff. And so I started making stuff for myself and So sewing and designing is kind of a side hobby that for many years has only just gone into like making children's Halloween costumes. But this past weekend, I made myself a jacket. For the first time in a long time, I sewed something for myself, and that was really satisfying. And there's just special delight I get out of doing something that doesn't involve a device, but instead is just working with my hands and making something that didn't exist otherwise. Yeah, things I do for fun. It's a lot of hands-on kind of hobbies.
That's cool. I love cooking as well. So I've one of the most exciting things for me is when you go to like a supermarket and you see an ingredient that you think, I've not used that before. How do I use it? How do I fit this in? And then like put it into a recipe. And I'm similar. I don't really follow recipes. I just kind of put it all in together and see what happens, kind of thing. But yeah, I love cooking. Love cooking. I wonder if that's something that a lot of creative people find, because I think cooking is really creative. I find it really creative, along with music as well. Really creative things. But in terms of, I'll say, what's your signature dish? What would that be?
Oh gosh, I do love playing with Asian flavors a lot, but actually the thing that my family requests the most, which is kind of funny and it's a very humble thing, but I've got one in my fridge right now to do it, is I do this thing where I will do like a classic whole roasted chicken, which is very classic. I do it with lemon and honey and, slow roasted in the oven with some veggies on the side. And the reason they love it is because after I make the chicken, I then take all of the leftover parts of the chicken and I make homemade chicken stock. And then I'll make chicken soup after that. And so that's something, particularly now that the weather's getting colder where we are, that is being requested in the household. And I used to, like last year, we got really into bone broth, and for like gut health and things like that, my husband and I try our best to be healthy. And so I felt like every week I was like, on demand to make this chicken. So it was nice to take a break from it for a while, but I'm going to cook one up this weekend for the family.
It's strange as well, because I do the same thing. So roast chicken, and then chicken soup. And there's nothing better than, chicken soup made with, with this chicken. It's just, it's unbelievable. Yeah. Really good.
So flavorful, so delicious. And it's like, to me, it's one of those things that, again, like cooking to me is an extension of giving love to my family. And so there's nothing like homier than making something like that and everyone sitting down and enjoying it.
Yeah, it also reminds me of being a kid. My mum used to do it for me. If I had a cold or something, it would always be like chicken noodle soup. There you go, have that. And always sorts you out. Yeah, so cool. So what are some top tips you can give the listeners today to help them build a fearless brand that creates a positive impact?
The first one would be to really dig in and write as much as you can in those early days about what inspires you to build a company or to launch something into the world. I think that not enough people take time to really ruminate in those early stages. And I find that if you take time to journal every day as you're starting out, you can really return back to those things in moments of hardship or in moments of inspiration. And so I really recommend starting a journaling practice where you're reflecting on the experiences you're having and able to just get down on paper, why it is that you're going to continue to forge this. The other thing that I really want to encourage people to build a fearless brand is to get clear with your boundaries early on, because so much about brand building, like we said earlier, is about, not just attracting the right people in, but repelling people away. And so getting really clear as to like, what are the things that you're unwilling to compromise on? What are the things that are an automatic no for you? And particularly for women in business, I think that this is a skill we really need to build, because we're conditioned, I should say, to be likable and to have everybody approve of what we're doing. But having a sense of boldness to your brand is a really critical way to just not waste time on people who aren't a fit for you in the first place. And so really sitting with yourself and saying, these are the areas I don't want to compromise on. These are the hard and fast rules that we're putting in place for our company, and really bringing your personality to them as well. Like we have, a couple rules inside our team. One of them is no Las Vegas men. And what we mean by that is like, we don't ever want to work with the kind of guy who would take his girlfriend to Vegas and leave his wife at home. We don't ever want to endorse, working with men who are not being conscious of their impact in the world and the power that they wield. And so it's a joke we have, but it's a really firm rule that allows our team to recognize like we're all going to be respected, and the men that we are working with are going to defer to us as experts and be, really cognizant of supporting women in the working world. And then another one we have is GSD. So GSD stands for Get Shit Done. And it's a cultural factor that, it's not about hustling or overworking ourselves, but it's this kind of respectful understanding we have as a team, which is that we really value flexibility. But in order to have that level of flexibility, you have to GSD, you have to get shit done. And so, there's like these little pieces that early on in your identity and your brand building that you can start to establish for yourself, whether it's mantras or habits or, belief systems that you can then bring into your brand. And the thing that I also think is really important is to really allow your personality to play. There's nothing worse than something that's generic. It's better to be bold than to be something that's passed over. And so allowing your brand to be a reflection of your personality and the personality of your team is something that's really exciting to see in the world. And so don't shy away, from bringing your quirkiness or bringing your passion or bringing, the things that keep you up at night or the things that make you angry. I mean, there's so many different emotions that we feel and we experience that pull us along this path to even starting a company. And it's so important not to leave those things at the door, but instead to bring them in and bring them forth in the way that you're doing business so that you can attract the people you're really meant to work with.
Yeah, it's really hard to sometimes integrate that, isn't it? Some of those things that you've brought along the way. So how do you start to develop that personality, sort of build those things in your clients? Where are the first places you start?
If we have a client that comes along who is just, not expressing themselves to the fullest, or, commonly we'll see a mismatch, you'll meet this founder and you're like, wow, you're so interesting and inspiring. And yet you have this whole presence online that is cookie cutter and made of templates. And, we often find is that, that business owner will say, oh, well, I'm not a creative. And I just, hired my nephew to build the site or, had my personal assistant do the social media and, I'm not creative. And so that's the first thing we try and dispel is like letting go that limiting belief that they don't have something worth sharing. And then, we love to ask questions that really inspire people to think differently about their business. And so we, when we do brand identity work, for example, we have this oh gosh, I've lost track. It originally was 30 and now it's probably 50 plus slide series of questions that we ask people to just really get them talking about their brand and the reasons behind it. And some of the questions seem quite off the wall. If your brand was to be played by a movie star, who would it be and why, or, if somebody was to voice your audiobook, who would it be and why? Things like that really allow for us to have people kind of put aside kind of any conceptions they're coming to the table with and get really curious. And, there's such great information that comes out. We had a client recently who is an amazing hairdresser and they are building, their first physical space. And, we were going back and forth as to what this brand should be. And we asked that question and they said, oh, if anyone was to play my brand, it would be Tilda Swinton. And immediately, our creative team just sparked in this huge way because taking, this kind of broad conceptual idea and distilling it down to a person who's so iconic and has such, this bold way of being in the world, all of us can wrap our ideas and say, okay, well, this gives us direction. This is a way that we can play. And that's the other piece too, is that, giving yourself some permission to play and to recognize that brand is such an evolving thing. That's really the beauty of it, is that it's this kind of partner that you get to work with as your business becomes, the brand can evolve as you have a new level of understanding or you have a new level of awareness in the world. And to see it as something that you can not have to be insanely serious about, but rather be kind of in this constant state of play with, allows for entrepreneurs to lighten up and lean into it a little more.
Yeah, it's one of the most fun aspects, I think, in terms of brand development is that evolution as well. The way that it will grow and shape and move as the company changes, but also, just evolve over time, just evolve. And personality is fantastic. When you said Tilda Swinton, then first thing I thought of was, I was thinking of her in actually Avengers, in that film in the Avengers, in Doctor Strange and her role she played in that, this kind of calm, but powerful individual that has a real presence about her. That's really kind of, it's really amazing how when you put a character to it, you start to think of attributes from that character and how that could be developed further into marketing or the visual identity. So it's really cool. So if I was to ask you what character would play your brand if it was in a movie, who would it be?
This is pretty easy. It's Wonder Woman.
Yes. Yeah.
So, and the reason being is because, a couple elements. One is there is this strong feminine energy about our brand. We're an all-female team and we don't apologize for it. And, if you think about Wonder Woman and this mascara, that's just a place where women live and work together and are strong and they're fighters and their fierceness to it. But the other thing about it is Wonder Woman as a character, is so much about fighting for what's right and going up against odds that might seem insurmountable and still persisting, whether it's to protect, human life or to change the way things are being done in the world and to stop injustice. And that's so much what we're about at the Foundry, is that we really deeply believe that our work helps propel founders to change the world. And, there's so many different avenues, to create positive and lasting change. And, the big thing that I love about the entrepreneurs we work with is that each of them have their own corner of the world. Nobody needs to fight. There's plenty of problems to solve. And we get to be that force behind them, just really propelling them to do it that much faster and that much stronger. And so, yeah, that's the character I would say we identify with around here.
Yeah, that's a great choice. I think you're right. And the more personality you have, the more you're different, the more of a sort of an individual tribe you'll have as well that follows you. So you don't have to worry about the competition because you are an individual personality or an individual brand that has their own tribe that follows them. So in terms of, say, companies recently that either you've worked with or you've seen, who do you think has really sort of nailed their branding?
That's a good question. There's a brand online, this is quite avant-garde, that I follow called Patagonia. This is one of my absolute favorite Instagram accounts to follow. Patagonia is Patagonia, just to say it properly, not the outdoor brand, but is actually an influencer on the internet that is really focused on building safe spaces for queer individuals in the outdoors. And they're super passionate about environmental justice and about raising awareness about plastics pollutions and things like that. But I've never seen a brand with more personality, because the individual behind the account is basically a lover of drag and a drag aficionado. And so they make these incredible videos where they'll build an entire drag costume out of bits of trash or, bits of recycled material, and then make a really, really bold statement about the ways in which we can be, acting to save the planet or to take care of, our fellow friends in the outdoors. And it's just one of these things that brings me like such a smile, but also really flips culture on its head and pushes back against the notion of like what sustainability or what environmental activism has to look like. Because I think part of the reason people are disengaged in some of those conversations is it's quite dry and it's quite boring, and it's all doom and gloom, and it's all facts that we've been told over and over again. But to take something that's quite serious and to bring drag and to bring play and to bring this wild costuming and music and sass and queer culture to it is such a great way to actually get people engaged with the issue. And so I really love brands that do something like that take something that is a hard topic to talk about, but use a level of creativity and play to push the agenda forward and to get people to want to get involved and pay attention.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'll have to, I'll put a link to the Instagram account in the show notes of this podcast, because that sounds really interesting. I have to check that out. So the
videos on this account are fantastic. They'll crack you up. They're really good.
Oh, so it's Patagonia. So
Pattiegoni.
Cool. Yeah, I'll be checking it out.
IA, sorry. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool. So it's been really good having you on. Really, really good. I've really enjoyed it. And it'd be great to do again, actually do a follow-up. Where can people find out more about yourself, Fearless Foundry, and anything else you're doing at the moment that you want to sort of let the listeners know about?
Yeah. Let's see. So you can find me at Madeline K. Pratt. That's like on all of my social media. So Instagram, Twitter. I don't really do Facebook anymore. Madeline Pratt on LinkedIn. The company is at Fearless Foundry on social media, or fearlessfoundry.com is our website. And then other things that we've been working on, we have a podcast as well where we interview female founders, and we're actually kind of starting the pre-production for season 3. So I'm really excited on the list of women we've pulled together, all walks of life, all different industries. And so, if anyone wants to check out and hear, great stories of female founders, our podcast is called Finding Fearless, and you can get it on, Apple, Spotify, all the places where podcasts are found.
Cool. Yeah, I'll put all the links in the show notes. And thanks again. It's been really, really good. And it'd be good to catch up again sometime.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Chris.
We've just put together a weekly brand tip video series, which is designed to help you to unlock your brand's potential and stand out from the competition. And if you're interested, if you just go to elementsbrandmanagement, all one word, .co.uk/weekly-brand-tips, sign up and you'll be delivered a 3 to 5 minute video a week straight to your inbox. I'll put a link in the show notes if you're interested. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to receive more, you can subscribe in all the usual places. We're talking iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. Please, if you get a chance, rate and review. It helps the podcast to kind of get a bit more visibility and allows us to keep on producing these podcasts. Have a great week. Catch up soon. Keep those brands unified.